All right, guys, thank you so much for joining in. I'm super excited because today we have another episode of the Book Brew, where we talk books while enjoying some brew as well. And I'm also super excited because we have another special guest here on the channel, with that being Tim Hawken, who is the author of multiple books, with me reading 2 so far, being Thrill Switch and his new prequel novella being Killware, which I highly enjoyed both of them, and I recommend them to anyone watching this right now, especially if you're a fan of cyberpunk at all. I definitely highly recommend you to go check those out today. But without further ado, Tim, thank you so much for joining me this morning instead of not tonight, this morning over there in Australia. So how are you doing this morning?
I'm great. We're getting close to midday, so the perfect time to crack a beer and have a chat about books and sci-fi and cyberpunk and whatever else you want to chat about.
Usually they say it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but you know, we can drink beer whenever we want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's breakfast beers. A lot of the seems like a lot of the craft beers these days taste like breakfast juice. So spot on.
We even have beers called like a breakfast stout. So when are you supposed to drink that? At breakfast.
Yeah, obviously.
So, before we get into questions on your books and everything else related to books, let's just crack open one of our first beers here. Get the thing started off. For me, I have a beer that's by a brewery called Brewdog, which is a brewery out of Columbus, Ohio. And what's interesting is that I've actually been to the brewery itself. They actually have a hotel attached to this brewery, because they make it a full-on experience when you go there. They have a whole tasting room. You can tour the brewery. They have this really cool outdoor sitting area. You can order food. So it's cool to see that. I'm in Florida at the moment, so it's just cool to see that this beer is made all the way down to me down in Florida when it's coming out of Ohio. So that's what I have for my first one today. What about you?
Cool. Well, I've got my little cooler, my little beer cooler.
That's probably a good idea.
So what am I going to... I'll start with this nice yellow one. This is from Eagle Bay Brewery, which is a local brewery only about 10 minutes from my house. I often surf with the brewer.
Wow.
He's a top bloke. His name's Nick. And I got this one in particular. It's their XPA, so extra pale ale.
XPA.
One before, and it's a mid-strength. It's only a 3.5% alcohol content. And I thought, since it's the morning, and I don't want to totally ruin my productivity for the day, I might start a little bit lighter and then go up into the IPAs and whatnot as we move along.
That's a good idea. I'm not even sure what the percentage on this one is actually. Oh, 7. Yeah, we're starting off a little bit strong on this one.
Coming in hot.
So thank you again. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah, this one's good. New England style IPA. So yeah, I am starting off strong in this one. Straight to the IPAs here.
Now this one's good too. Easy drinking. Good little bit of kind of hoppy fruit. It's really nice actually. I think this might be one of my go-to beers this summer, because it's January here. It's only the second month of summer, so it's probably high 90s over here if I kind of try and figure out what that is in Fahrenheit, something like that. It's about 35 degrees today, so it's pretty warm.
So did you say that you surf with that brewer?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I'm located in Western Australia, down in it's actually a region that's famous for wine. It's called the Margaret River Wine Region, and live on the coast, and there's hundreds of great surf breaks along the coast here. So it's one of my favorite pastimes. I grew up surfing with my dad and my brother, and it was a massive part of my sort of childhood and teenage years. And still to this day, I surf with my kids down here.
That's awesome.
Every morning as well. Yeah.
I can actually see the surfboard in the background there. So
Yeah.
Oh, there's a few of them. Wow.
There's a few there. So
hiding.
that orange one is that's a collector's item. It belonged to a guy who's a 4 times world champ in the 80s called Mark Richards. He's a pretty famous guy over here, but yeah, if you don't surf, you'd never have heard of him. But before, kind of the era before Kelly Slater kind of thing.
Wow, yeah, that's insane. So I first wanted to talk not about your books, but about a little tidbit that you mentioned to me when we were just chatting back and forth when I first reached out to you, and that it was this fun fact from you that you write, I think you said, you write beer descriptions for one of the top craft breweries in Australia. Is that right?
That's true. So I do have one of their beers for later on. So I'll read out the description when we get there. But so I, by trade, am a copywriter. So for people who aren't familiar with that, it's essentially just writing to help sell things.
Mm-hmm.
So ad copy, descriptions, brand stories, things like that. And the creative director of this brewery, I had worked with him previously in another role, and when they first started, he approached me to see if I could help put together a pitch deck to get investors. And they recently sold for like $250 million or something like that to InBev, which is the big kind of Japanese consortium that owns a lot of breweries. So they've kept on the creative director and the brewer, and like part of the deal was they had to keep on all the staff. And so they haven't changed anything, and I've still got a gig when they release a new beer, writing the descriptions for their beers. But they've been doing really, really great stuff. They're called Bolter. Incredible brewery over here.
That's amazing. So if you're writing description for beers, I would think that you're pretty well versed into like the beer lingo, right? Because to me, I'm just like a simple guy. I say, yeah, this one tastes pretty good. Yeah. But to you, you're writing like full-on descriptions for it. So that's amazing.
Yeah, although I have to admit, I do rely pretty heavily on the brewer.
Okay.
When it comes to, like, I put a lot of color and fun around it. But most of the time I haven't even tasted the beer. So they're on the other side of the country, which it's a big country. It's a 4-hour flight to where they are. And so I'll get on a call like this and we'll just chat about what they're trying to achieve with the beer. This, it's got passion fruit notes, or it's a really hoppy beer. It's a really strong beer. It's got a creamy mouthfeel. They kind of run through what the experience is and what kind of food you might pair it with and what they're kind of trying to do with the beer. And then I'll just spin that in my weird brain and come back with probably 3 different options for them. And credit to them, they often take the most fun, wacky one to run with. So it's been a lot of fun working with them.
That is exciting. I never really thought about like the actual descriptions on the beer. Like someone is writing it to sound unique, but also entice people to drink it. So now that you mention it, I'm like, that makes complete sense. So that's an awesome position.
The funny thing is, sometimes I'll write one. I'll be like, "Oh, this sounds really good. I want them to send me some of this beer."
Yeah, don't they send you some samples or something for you to taste?
Exactly. It sounds great.
So, going into your books now. So, I've read 2 of your works so far in terms of being on the cyberpunk side of things. I know you have other work that's outside of that genre, but I did read Thrill Switch so far and Killware. So I loved both. So everyone on the call that's watching this back, definitely recommend to go check that out. Again, are you working on anything still in that Thrill Switch universe? Because I really enjoyed it. I want to go back into the Hollow. So anything else you got going on in that universe?
I have a plot mapped out for a sequel to Thrill Switch. So an actual follow-up with the characters in that. But right now, I'm right in the middle of writing basically an eco-terrorism novel. So still in that sort of sci-fi field, but a little bit different. But normally what I'll try and do is, so I'll finish the draft of that, put it away for a month, start working on the Thrill Switch sequel, and then come back to that with fresh eyes, and then that's when you pick up all of your mistakes and your things like that. For me anyway, I find if I go back and edit straight away, I just can't see the forest from the trees. I'm too deep in it, and I'm reading what I want to read rather than what's on the actual page as well. So if I rotate projects like that, I tend to get more done. Otherwise, it just takes so much longer to get things, and publishing is such a slow process as it is. Anything I can do to just help the wheels spin a little faster, I try and do.
I feel like I do something kind of similar to that in terms of reading, where like I usually read like 3 to 4 books at a certain time, but after after like an hour though of reading one, I'm like, okay, I need to take a little bit of a break, because like if your eyes are just focused on this one book for so long, at least for me, I'm just like, okay, I need a little bit of a break from this particular universe. Not saying I don't love it. I usually do. It's just I want to take a little bit of break. So that's why I usually flip back and forth from like a sci-fi book straight into a fantasy book, because when you go from technology to like sword fighting, it's a little bit different. So you have a little bit of a break there. So
and then I guess you've got you're not going to confuse the plots of the two as well, because that's what I would do. I'd start to just turn into this mashup in my mind, and I'd be telling someone about the book, and they'd be like, "That doesn't sound like that was that was in the book."
So when Thrill Switch came out, was that originally published through a Kickstarter campaign? I know there was a special edition version of it, but was it published before that campaign came out on Kickstarter?
No, so that was basically the launch. So I had previously, with my dark fantasy novels, had a publisher in the UK, and they pivoted to self-help books. And so I was like, okay, well, dark fantasy and dark sci-fi is probably not going to fit too well in your catalogue. And so I was left with the choice of, all right, do I go out there and try and find a new agent, a new publisher, etc., or do I try the self-publishing thing? Because it's always intrigued me, and just not waiting for permission and having things your way. And so I thought, so I put my toe in the water a little bit with a novella, a dark fantasy novella called Spellraiser. And that launched, I think, the day before Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter campaign.
Oh no!
Where
he broke some records that day.
It was like $36 million or something, right? And I'm like, my target was $1,000, I think. And but I guess the cool thing was that if you had a sci-fi or fantasy release at that time, there was a lot of sci-fi and fantasy lovers on Kickstarter. And whoever was running his campaign backed Spellraiser as well.
Oh.
So I'll say Brandon Sanderson backed my book, but it's more than likely his PA or something like that. And it smashed its target in 24 hours and did quite well. And so I was like, oh, this is fun. And so when Thrill Switch came along, it just seemed like a bit of a no-brainer to me that, yeah, let's do it this way. And also a cool way for me to test variations of cover art and see which ones resonated most with people, because I had 3 and I loved all of them and I really didn't know which one. And then 2 of them in particular came out as really strong. And so one I made the collector's edition hardcover cover, and then the most popular one, which is I think the one you like the most, was the paperback. And so it was a really cool way, one, to just get some interest and get some backing behind it before I officially launched it on Amazon, and 2, just a really fun way to engage with a couple of different artists and and figure out which one was the more commercial, or at least the more popular cover to run with.
That's great. Yeah, I know. I actually love both covers, or at least the ones that I've seen. The special edition version, I have that now that you sent to me, so thank you so much for sending that my way through that Killware Kickstarter. I was actually surprised that there were still some available, because I thought I missed it when I but I was looking at the Killware Kickstarter. I was like, man, I really wanted that, because at that time I read Thrill Switch and I really enjoyed it, so I wanted that special edition version of it. So yeah, I thought I missed it, but no, I got it now, so thank you so much for that.
Perfect.
So no, I love both covers. The one that's like the Stainer paperback, I think looks awesome as well. So I think if I throw any of those two on like Twitter or social media, I think everyone's gonna love whichever one, because they look great. But that one with the the red glowing eyes just staring back at you, that's very ominous. So that one's fun.
Yeah, so I guess cool story behind that one was the name of the artist of that cover, his name's Stefan Keudel. He's an Austrian artist. He makes these crazy horror masks. Like, check him out on Instagram. He's amazing. So, and he also is quite active on Instagram, and he drops a bunch of dark art on there quite a lot. And I have this little program I run on my Instagram where if I see a piece of art I love, I'll ask the artist if I can share it and write a 100-word story, just exactly 100 words, just really short to go with it. And I posted a couple of Stefan's and they did quite well. And then he did an art book on Kickstarter, and he's like, oh, can I use some of these stories in my book?
Yeah.
And then put a call out to his fan base and said, please write stories about these pieces of art. And if yours is selected, I'll send you a book, and you'll get a credit in the back, all that sort of thing. And so it was just a bit of fun to run with it. And so then, yeah, when Thrill Switch came along, I was like, well, I know who one of the artists is that I want to try out for this cover, and he's such a professional. And just I had a different idea for that cover, and he came back with that one, and I was like, oh, we'll go with you, because you're a lot better than I am at visual stuff.
I actually wanted to bring that up in terms of your Instagram account, because I actually just started my Instagram account like last week after finding, I didn't even realize that the book community was pretty active on Instagram. I had no idea. It's like I was solely making my journey through Twitter or X or whatever people are calling it nowadays, and that was it. But then I found out that there's actually a huge community that's very active on Instagram. So when I went over there and I eventually found you on there, I saw that you had like 40,000 followers on Instagram. I was like, holy cow, that is a ton. And then I'm scrolling through all that art, which looks psychedelic. It looks like it's putting me in a fever dream. It's phenomenal. So now it makes sense. So you reach out to artists that you see, asking them if you can repost and put a 100-word story to their artwork, right? Is that what?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, that came about just because I struggle with social media. Really, maybe it's my age, but I just don't like. I feel like I don't like putting selfies up. I don't want to. I think it's irrelevant if I'm posting pictures of my breakfast as a writer. And so I was just trying to figure out what's something that's going to be interesting for people. And yeah, I personally just love art, and I follow a whole bunch of artists. And so, yeah, I was lying in bed one night and was just like, oh, what if I write and at the time I was writing quite a few drabbles, which are stories of exactly 100 words. And so then the two ideas just kind of came together, and it works really well. And then I think for this year, I'm planning on using a bit of AI art as well for the stories, like generating it myself on Midjourney, which is a little bit of an ethical minefield. I'm like, oh, is it the right thing to do? How do I kind of navigate this? Just because of how those things are trained. And but yeah, I'm sort of dipping my toe in the water there, and still making sure I'm sharing different art on my feeds and helping promote other artists and stuff as well, because those guys are they're like magicians to me. I don't know about you. If I see someone drawing, it's totally like magic. Because I can't draw at all. And so to see someone literally create a character or a scene from nothing is just mind-blowing, totally mind-blowing to me. And so, any way I can support those guys through my own channels, I'll try and do it.
It's someone I saw just recently did exactly what you're talking about, but for a dragon. And it was actually for another author named Corey Ratliff, who actually purchased a few images of dragons, finding out that it was actually generated by AI.
Right.
And he was not supportive of using those images. So what's crazy is that an artist reached out to him saying, hey, I'll be happy to commission some dragons for you to use for your covers. And the result of that was this fantastic dragon images that look beautiful. And she released a video of her actually drawing and sketching it out like live, and you got to see it come to life. It was insane. And that artist's name is Shelly Campbell too. So I'm not sure if she has an Instagram, but I know she's on Twitter.
Okay.
But yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, I mean those process videos that people do, they really do blow my mind. And there's some, whether it's hand drawn or they're working on some kind of program and they're using ZBrush or something like that, it really is just so amazing, and those guys are so talented. So it would be a massive shame to see AI discourage people for developing that talent. And I don't think it will. I mean, even as a writer and a copywriter, machines are coming for my job too. But I don't think that'll stop me from writing, because I enjoy it, and it's so much fun to kind of get your thoughts on a piece of paper, and it's always going to be a bit different to what a computer can come out with. So yeah, I'm happy to just keep going and doing my own thing and trying to use that technology to be better too. Because if you can either resist it, or, which I think history shows is probably a mistake, because it's not going to stop, or you can embrace it and try and evolve with it, and come out the other end doing something even more interesting, hopefully. So that's the plan on my end.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's like when Google or our search engine first came out, people were hesitant to use that, but then now we have an even more advanced search engine using ChatGPT or other providers like that, like Bard, whatever Google's calling it. So yeah, there's a ton coming out. But going to your Instagram stories of 100 words each, before I actually ask a question about that, I think it's a good time to move on to the second beer. We'll taste the second one already.
Oh, let's go.
And on my side, I'm going with Terrapin Beer Company Lua.
That is a pretty psychedelic looking can as well.
It definitely is. This one has passion fruit, orange, and guava. It's another IPA. Yep. So,
right. What do we got there?
What's the percent on this one here? Oh, it's only 6.5. So it's not too
easy, no worries. So I've got the Bolter Easy Hazy.
Oh, Bolter, there it is.
So this is the brand that I do stuff for, and this is only 4%. So again, it's slightly more than 3.5, but I'm working my way up the tree. And I'll read the descriptor out. So it is normally a hazy beer. For those who aren't into beer, hazies are often quite strong. They might be a 7 or an 8%, depending. Really fruity beer, and really, like on really hot summery days, they're delicious. And the name hazy basically means they don't get filtered through. They're not a clear, crisp beer. They've got a hazy sort of swirly look to them. And there was a big hazy movement in Australia, so much that people were adding tapioca starch and things to their beers, so they looked more hazy.
Oh my gosh, no way.
And the purists hated that. They thought it was the worst thing ever. So this doesn't have any starch in it. But it says, because it's an easy hazy, it says, why use a stick of dynamite when a party popper will do the trick? Easy hazy brings the colour and spark while keeping things nicely chilled. Succulent US hops deliver lime, passion fruit, and hints of coconut around a creamy rolled wheat base to balance the zesty, bitter finish. Pull the ripcord on one without strain or stress, your well-contained taste explosion. So I'll pull the ripcord on this one.
There we go. Was that one that you wrote?
That is one I wrote.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, cheers
again.
Cheers to party poppers.
Oh yeah. That's a little bit tropical.
Yeah, so like is this one. So is this one.
There we go.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had this one, so I can definitely taste that sort of passion fruity lime stuff in there. So apparently I was right when I wrote it, even though I definitely wouldn't have tasted this beer when I wrote that.
And it's funny that you mentioned hazy beers now, because I just realized the one I just drank, the first one, is a hazy. It's a hazy beer. Well, that's funny.
I've got a glass here that did have water in it before. I'll pour this in, and then I might be able to show people if. So see, see how it's definitely, you can't see my face through there, right? So it's definitely got that hazy, cloudy kind of look to it.
That's great. So, going back to the 100-word stories, I think that kind of puts two and two together in my mind, at least for Killware.
Yes.
Because when I was reading through Killware on the Kickstarter campaign, I was like, wait, what? So there's a hunt. So everyone who's watching this who does not know, it's a 100-chapter book of 100 words each in each chapter. Right? Did I say that right, Tim?
That's right. Yeah. 100,
that's wild.
100 word chapters.
So that alone is crazy. And I really questioned, I was like, is this able to tell a full complete story when reading through it? And absolutely it did. So I loved it so much. So when you're writing,
I questioned it too. It's like, is this actually going to work?
It worked for me. So
yeah,
I reviewed it. I put a 5-star out of 5 on there for that book. I love it so much. But when you're writing that, did you come to any points where you kept hitting 99 or 101, and then you're like, okay, what word can I remove to where it still makes sense?
Yeah.
Did you ever come across that, or what was that writing like?
All the time, and I've got, I guess, experience from writing the Instagram ones. After I've been doing it for about 3 years now, most days, and so you get a good sense for how long. When you've written a story, you're like, that's pretty much 100 words, and you might be one or two words short or over, and that's not too bad. 1 or 2 words is easy. It's when you write something that's 110 or 120 words and you're really happy with what it says, and particularly in a novella like that, where you're really trying to pace it and you're trying to give the reader enough meat, enough information to kind of understand what's going on. And then you've got to rip out 20 words or 10 words, and it's really, that's hard. 1 or 2 words is easy. And so, yeah, it definitely, there were some hair-pulling moments in there. And I actually, I left, the first draft was 99 chapters because I knew when I sent it to my editor, Alexis, he was going to come back and tell me that there needed to be more here or there. So I intentionally held back, knowing that I would need to add something somewhere. Because that's the trouble with that short format, is you pare down so much, it's often too fast, or you haven't given enough character detail so people don't care about the characters enough, or there's always the problem with it's not enough. So yeah, it's definitely a balance, but it's great to hear that at least you thought it worked, and the feedback so far has been fantastic. So yeah, really happy, and just something that was a bit of fun,
No, it was something unique that I've never read before. I was like, is this gonna work?
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out, and it did. So,
Right. And I have to say too, Megan Mushy, who did the
oh yeah, the
artwork,
art too. Hmm.
she just crushed it. She was amazing. I found her on Behance, which is like an artist network, and she's in Indonesia, and I was a little bit worried about the language barrier. And so, like, speaking of AI, I actually used some like just kind of really rough AI concept images and said, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And that worked brilliantly. And that was, you talk about tools in terms of being able to get across what you're kind of trying to get out of your head, and showing an artist something visually, especially when their first language isn't English. And my Indonesian is terrible. So, it was so helpful, and she smashed it. She really did. There was I think one drawing we had to do a couple of times, but other than that, it was like the first or second time she nailed it. So yeah, a real pro. If anyone needs artwork done, look her up on Behance. She's amazing.
Oh yeah, the artwork in Killware was fantastic. So yeah, great work there in finding her. It was fantastic.
I'll grab one.
There it is.
That's the cover.
That cover is absolutely insane, by the way.
Yeah, so that was
eye catcher.
That's pretty cool, neon art, and then inside, it's kind of like this techno noir sort of feel to it. Let me see if I can find a good one. So, like crime noir, but with a techno sort of cyberpunk feel to it. And yeah, she crushed it. She did such a great job. I was so happy. And that's the great thing about working with other people, is writing is such a lonely thing sometimes. That to be able to work with an artist and bring your vision to actual images is really special.
Fantastic job there. And actually, going to Thrill Switch real quick. When I was reading through that, I guess a little bit more context. I'm already a big fan of the cyberpunk genre. Well, I've read Snow Crash, I've read Neuromancer, I've read New Anoid's Dream of Electric Sheep. And when I was reading through Thrill Switch, there's a few scenes where I'm thinking maybe you drew inspiration, at least from a naming thing. Like, this is, I guess maybe...
sure. Yeah, definitely.
Like one in particular, there was a place called the Black Sun, and there was a guy named Gibson. Like, was I right in picking up on that in terms of those inspirations?
Absolutely. So for those, so the Black Sun is a nightclub in Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, and William Gibson is basically the godfather of cyberpunk as well. So there's definitely a few little, just tip of the hat to those trailblazers who basically created the whole genre, and yeah, inspired me as I actually came to cyberpunk late. I was really more into fantasy and dark fantasy through my teens and early 20s. But then when I read Snow Crash, I was just like, what is this? Like, it's just totally mind-blowing. And so really got my gears of imagination turning. And for anyone who hasn't read that book in particular, the audiobook's fantastic. So if you're into audiobooks, then look that up. It's a really, really classic piece of work.
Well, that's good. I'm glad I picked up on that correctly, because when I read the word the sentence the Black Sun, I was like, oh, I know that.
I'm glad someone actually got it too, because when you put those little kind of things in there, you're like, no one's gonna notice this. So to have someone notice it, just it's satisfying to hear that.
That's great. And something else too, in Thrill Switch, you named the VR like reality world the Hollows, which is a very cool name, by the way. But I know, like, throughout all my different cyberpunk reads, there's been a few different names out there, like the Matrix or the metaverse, or even in Ready Player One, they call it the Oasis. Like, how did the Hollows come into fruition for you and putting it into Thrill Switch?
Yeah, so great question. I think now too, like the metaverse, speaking of Snow Crash, that was where the phrase metaverse was coined. And I think now most VR developers use metaverse with a small m rather than a capital M, just to describe cyberspace or a virtual reality space. And I do too. And so I didn't want to just say metaverse because I wanted to differentiate a little bit. The Holos, the name, actually came from one of my favorite futurists called Kevin Kelly. And he said he would like to see it called the Holos. So I was like, oh, well, bugger it, I'll here you go,
Okay.
mate. Even though I don't know him from, he wouldn't know who I am. But yeah, so I should probably send him a book and say thank you and please don't sue me.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like the name. And also for me, this particular metaverse, the thing about it is it brings all of the disparate metaverses together. So say Facebook creates something and Instagram is Meta, but all these other companies, Sandbox has got one, and there's a World of Warcraft one, and this and that. The genius of the Holos is it's an open source software built on blockchain that anyone can plug into and build their own universe or tag on the one they've already created, and it brings them all together in a way where you can keep your personality that you've built and move between all of those worlds. And I think just looking at the way technology works, is that seems to be what the success of the internet was, is everyone could build their separate websites and everything, but you can navigate your way through as in a seamless way. And that seems to be just how general trends work. So I figure when and if the metaverse spaces start to come alive, at some point, someone's going to bring them all together, and that's when it'll really take off. Because if you want to live a second life in a certain way, you don't want to have to create a new personality for every single place you're visiting. So to be able to go through in the same avatar, use the same money, use the same diamond sword or whatever you're kind of into, I just think that that's the future of how it's going to go. So that was the reason why I pulled it together the way I did.
That's awesome. So going to the metaverse, Facebook's metaverse. Have you been in the Facebook's metaverse at all?
No, I haven't. The funny thing is I get motion sickness when I go into VR.
Oh no.
I'm so obsessed with it. But I'm waiting for the kind of latency to get better before I can really go in for a long period of time. I did see, I think it's Lex Friedman interviewed Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse, and it looks pretty striking, like when you just see the video of it. But I'm going to Japan in February for the first time, and I've booked in a couple of VR experiences over there because I believe some of their VR experiences are really quite amazing. And so I'm looking forward to that. I just hope I don't vomit while I'm in there.
Yeah, I didn't think I would get motion sickness that much.
Yeah.
But there was a certain game, I forget which one it was. I think it was on the PS5. I forget what they call their headset, but there was a game on there that completely just destroyed me, where I had to sit down and be like, oh my god.
Yeah, just so it's brain, or and you lose time, and it's a pretty wild space. It really is, like when you go in there, and I can't remember the name of it, but I had a VR headset and was in this like whale underwater experience, and you like underwater, and it's so amazing. And so And I think I felt like I was in there for 5 minutes, and it was over half an hour. And
Oh wow.
so it really does stretch time and bend reality. And the tech's not that good, really. Like, if you, in terms of embodiment, like, you're in a game still, pretty much.
Oh yeah.
When that gets better, I think it is going to change things a lot. And you talk about how social media has changed how we interact with each other, and video feeds where we're speaking from across the world, and it feels like we're sharing a beer together. Like, imagine if we could plug into VR and do this in a bar. It would be so cool.
Yeah, that would be insane. I know the metaverse was attempting something like that, but I don't think it's there just yet. I mean, Facebook's metaverse.
Yes.
Eventually we'll get there. That's probably going to happen, hopefully, within the next 5 years-ish, where it's becoming a little bit more realistic than what it is right now, to where at least we have legs on our avatars.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And arms, not just a floating hand in front of you, and things like that. But I mean, I remember playing Snake on a Nokia 3210 or whatever, and Pong on whatever, a Commodore 64 way back in the day as a little kid. So you think about the games that are out there now, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. As the cyberpunk game actually is just like, it's like watching a film. So I think that will change, and the rate at which cameras and tech and hardware are evolving, I really think it's going to get there eventually. Whether or not it's totally indistinguishable from reality, I think the test will come when taste and smell and those other senses really come into it. If they can crack that and crack touch as well, in a real way, it's going to be really amazing.
Or then going into Thrill Switch, we got to be synced up too. Synced up to the HoloLens.
Yeah. Sync your body rhythms, sync everything together, so it's a zero lag experience, and you feel like you're fully embodied, and that's me just projecting forward and going, I would love you to be totally embodied. And I mean, in The Matrix, which is another cyberpunk classic in terms of a film, I think when I saw that film, I didn't even know the word cyberpunk potentially, because that was like, I think that was still it was certainly post Neuromancer, but post Snow Crash and everything. But plugging into your brainstem, I think, is potentially, could happen as well. There's the skull cap technology that I had in there, which is a little bit of a riff on Elon Musk's little wizard hat that he's got going on, Neuralink. So yeah, it's coming. It's a matter of time and how long that's going to be.
So I actually wanted to ask you about Cyberpunk 2077 real quick, but I think we're now at a good point to move on. The beer number 3 already, which is crazy. And for my number 3, this is going to be just a classic beer over here in America, with that being Yingling.
Nice.
They are still technically a craft brewery under the definition of what a craft brewer is. I think it's like under 2 million barrels in a year. They're like right underneath it.
Yeah.
So they're huge. This is usually my go-to right here is Yingling. Yeah. So that's what I have for right now. What about you?
Is that a brown ale as well? It looks like it's got a little bit of.
It's a bottle right here.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. A lager. I have. So it's interesting to see. Not many in Australia, at least. Not many craft beers are in bottles. There's a few, but there's been a big movement to have them in cans. My number 3 is number 1. This was voted the number 1 craft beer in Australia last year.
Oh, Mountain Culture.
2022. I think it was actually 23 as well, maybe. Mountain Culture. They're right near Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. A lot of people think that Sydney or Melbourne are, but Canberra is is the capital, and I've never had this beer.
Oh, you haven't had it? It's the number
No,
one
I've
selling.
I've never had it, and I was like, it's about damn time.
Wait,
But
was this the? Have we got to the $15 beer yet? Is that the one?
No, that's the last one.
Okay,
So,
that's the last one. We're saving that one.
I've got to work myself up to something that expensive. This was $5, I think. This was a third of the price. So this is a New England pale, made for hop lovers with massive late and dry hop additions, full flavored and more tropical than the Hawaiian Ukulele Orchestra.
There we go.
And that's
Classic.
delicious. That is really nice. I can see why that's so popular. But lots of really, really fruity, hoppy beer. So, but without it's a 5.2%, so not crazy strong either.
Hey, that's not bad.
Yeah.
I never really looked up what Yingling even is.
You
I have no idea. I just drink it, man.
Yeah. So this one, the Eagle Bay Brewery, they made one that was, I think, pushing 9%. It might have even been higher. And they had to ban their staff from drinking it for after work drinks because they didn't want people to drive home under the influence. It's like, you're not even allowed one because then you're going to be over, and that's on us. So yeah, they had to ban the staff from being able to have a knockoff drink.
Wow. Yeah, I've had a few, I think like 11% beers in the past. And those, you probably just need one of those, and you're pretty much good.
Oh, mate, I just can't. I'm just like, oh, it burns.
So, have you actually played the Cyberpunk 2077 game at all?
No, I haven't. I was really captured by their marketing campaign, though. I thought what they did with that was just brilliant. For someone who has traditionally worked in marketing and that space, the lead time that they pulled everything together, the fact they got Keanu Reeves to play a character in it, as someone who's, he's Neo, right? So to have his likeness in there, to basically, I think a lot of people think they made up the name cyberpunk. They don't even know it's a genre of books that's been around for decades. Like I had a couple of comments, saying you've ripped off the video game, and I'm like, well,
oh my gosh,
video game kind of ripped off the genre, not the other way around.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just, but that's because they've pulled it so much more into the mainstream, where cyberpunk was kind of, I think through the 90s and the early 2000s, it was pretty solid, but it still was a fringe genre until that video game came out. So I understand why people think that they created it, because they just did such a bloody great job.
They had Keanu Reeves come out on stage and tell all of us that we're beautiful. So you can't argue with that.
No, you're like, yes, I am. I totally am. So yeah, I haven't. In short, I haven't played it, but yeah, I think I mentioned, before we were recording, it's been a long time since I've played video games outside of SpongeBob racing with my 8-year-old son. So I look forward to them getting a little bit older and introducing them to Grand Theft Auto and Cyberpunk and a few other games as well, because that'll be a lot of fun. My brother, his kids are a touch older. He's just gotten addicted to The Legend of Zelda again. He's been playing Zelda once they've gone to bed and things like that. So it's coming. I can't wait to get back into it.
That's great. Yeah, the game was a lot of fun. I know when it first came out, it was buggy. There's no denying that it was buggy and almost unplayable, like on the PS4.
Yeah, right.
But eventually, it got to a spot to where it was playable, and I really enjoyed it. So, if you do ever get to a point to where you can play it, it's a fun game. So, yeah, Keanu Reeves definitely delivers a good Keanu Reeves performance. He acts like himself in the game, which always comes across great.
Perfect. And they've just released a new patch, right? It's like a brand new extension to the game.
I think it's called like Phantom something.
Yeah.
Phantom. Yeah, but I heard that had stellar reviews as well, so I think they're getting back into a good spot now.
Yeah, it's funny. I think when they released that extension, there was a bump in sales for Thrill Switch, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And that's why I know that there's an extension, because it's like it was noticeable. It was like, okay, people are they're leaning into the genre a bit more, and it's like the whole rising tide floats all boats saying. It really does. If you can get people in love with that kind of story, and that's what they do, it's a storytelling experience, then it's only good for everyone else that's doing what they're doing in that space.
So I have one more question for you in regards to cyberpunk specifically, because I know we've been talking about that a lot. I know you write outside of that genre as well, but what's your definition of cyberpunk? Because I know it's a little bit fluid. Like if you go on Reddit and people ask, what's the best cyberpunk books, and you get a bunch of responses, there's gonna be a lot of people saying, you know what, no, that book is not cyberpunk. You know what, that book is not cyberpunk. Actually, this one is. Like, what's your definition of what cyberpunk is to you?
Yeah, okay. I mean, look, I will, and I'm somewhat guilty of that too. So, like, a perfect example of what you're saying is Ready Player One. Obviously, very heavily immersed in VR, but I wouldn't call that cyberpunk. I would call that lit RPG. So to me, the very short definition is it's fiction that features high tech and low life. That's the very short kind of thing. So, I guess to unpack that a little bit, it's really like these ultra sophisticated high tech worlds, but where there is an underbelly of lawlessness and kind of scumbags doing what they want to do. And I just kind of feel like that potentially is what's going to happen, because there's always the dark side of human nature. And, you talk about VR tech. And so I just think that sort of seedy underbelly and technology go together hand in hand. And that's where cyberpunk has really come from. And then you've often got themes like there is an infatuation with Asian culture in there as well. Originally, a lot of it was Japanese culture, samurai swords, things like that. But you've got, some Cambodian culture in there as well. There's a recent cyberpunk book called 36 Streets, which is set in Vietnam, which is actually phenomenal. If anyone's looking for a cyberpunk book they haven't read 36 Streets by T.R. Napa, it's a great book. He's actually an Aussie as well, and he lived in Vietnam for years, and has just created this amazing world. So yeah, there's all these little things. I think VR often features in cyberpunk, but it doesn't need to. Body modifications and cybernetics often feature as well, but it's not necessary. So I really think that often the shortest definitions are the best, just because there's always exceptions. So just high tech and low life is probably the sweetest and shortest way I can say it. And I didn't come up with that. So that's someone else's definition, but I just think that's pretty spot on.
No, that makes complete sense. High tech, low life. So I would slightly challenge Ready Player One, just because the life there was pretty low.
Yeah, it's a little bit, right? But I just found it a bit like a bit poppy, which is kind of the point of it, like that whole 80s kind of pop culture and stuff. So I'm happy to be challenged on it. I just find it, if you like, lit PG is an adjacent genre. And I think even if you're on Amazon and you go to the cyberpunk charts, the top 50 almost are what I would term as lit RPG, like very fantasy based. And there's some great books in there, like Shadeslinger is a great one. There's a whole bunch. think it's He Who Fights Monsters is a series by a guy called Pantaloon. Well, like, what an awesome name for an author. But to me, they're not cyberpunk. They're lit RPG, and maybe Ready Player One kind of straddles the middle of that a little bit.
Yeah, because that book in particular, I'm not saying it is or it's not. I just know that when people bring it up on forums in regards to anything cyberpunk, people always go back and forth. No, it is. No, it's not. So I'm just interested to see, what your opinions on that one was.
Look, I wouldn't call it pure cyberpunk, but there's no denying the influence that book has had.
Oh yeah.
And not just on genres, but for actual like virtual reality development and how the Oasis was made and how it's based on a game. I think there's a lot of imagination and also a lot of insight there that VR developers are going to draw from and are drawing from. So if you talk about like the most influential virtual reality based books, that's got to be at the top of the list with Neuromancer and Snow Crash, and to a lesser extent virtual reality, but Altered Carbon's probably got to, that's a cyberpunk techno noir sort of. Techno noir is another adjacent one. They all sort of coalesce a little bit, but that's a great series if people haven't read that either.
Yeah, I have not read Altered Carbon just yet. I've watched the show though, and I really enjoyed the show. So I think I need to pick that one up here pretty soon.
The book's great. It's really well done. I mean, like anything, I think it's a little dated in how women are portrayed in there. So take that a little bit with a grain of salt. But in terms of the storytelling and the character development, it's really strong.
Mm-hmm. That's probably the one thing that stood out to me in Snow Crash was the age difference between a couple characters and their relationship. I was like, oh, that's
yeah. What's going on here? Yeah. No, I mean, I've totally different genre, but I've been listening to a bunch of the Dresden Files books, which is kind of fantasy, and God, some of the physical descriptions of women in there, I'm like, God, really? Like, there's no way you would even get away with that these days. And so, I think I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, and just go, don't read them. They're fantastic books, and the stories are great. And actually, the main character is quite a gentleman, even though he's very much a male gaze to his descriptions. It's the stories are really they're really great, and the women are portrayed as strong, independent characters in there as well. It really is just the physical descriptions of them often very, very sexualized.
That's the one drawback I see a lot of recent reviewers just getting into the Dresden Files is that exact thing you just mentioned. So, where are you at right now in the Dresden Files? 'Cause I'm currently on book number 3. I just finished that like maybe 3 or 4 months ago.
Yeah. So is that Grave Peril?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just finished that too. So we're in the same spot.
There we go.
We'll have to stay in touch and compare notes.
So many people that the first 3 books in the Dresden Files are the worst 3. Yeah. And that from book number 4 and on, it just gets better and better. So what's crazy is that I love the first 3 books. So if that's the case, I mean, we're in good hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, I've a couple of little things in there. You're like, okay, I'll let that slide. And those kind of things might change through book 5, and I think there's 17 books or something. So
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, we've got plenty to get through.
Awesome. Well, I think we're at the point now to the $15 beer.
Let's do this. So the punchline here is this beer is more expensive than Thrill Switch paperback if you want to get it on Amazon.
That's great.
It's big though. Look at it. It's huge.
See, it's a little bit bigger.
Let's compare that to the last beer, which is a normal size can. So this is an American beer, which means it has to be big.
What's the cover on that one? It looks pretty interesting.
Have a look at the cover. This is part of the reason why I bought it too. Like, look at that art.
It looks like a book cover. Yeah, it looks amazing.
It's amazing, right? So it pairs well with fugu and scorpion fish, apparently.
Fish, okay.
And Japanese style super dry rice lager. And Bottle Logic Brewing. It's from Anaheim in California.
California.
So $15 Australian for that beer. That's probably only about $2 American the way the exchange rate is at the moment.
The one that I have is by Kona Brewing Company, and this is a Longboard Island Lager.
Yeah, that sounds Hawaiian to me.
And it says ride a wave of crisp refreshment. There we go.
Yeah, ride the wave.
And
this is like really malty. This is almost you wouldn't call it a stout, but it's getting close. It's a dark ale for sure.
Now, do you like it? I guess that's
I do. It's like caramelly almost. It's 5.5%, 15 IBUs. So it's not that bitter for a stout. It's a really creamy. I'd almost call this a dessert beer. It's
oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's like kind of coffee, caramelly sort of taste to it.
We were just talking about breakfast beers at the beginning of the call. Now we're going to dessert. The end of the.
Now we're going to dessert. Let's go.
Here.
We had just your regular main course in the middle, and here we go. That is a dessert beer. I love the art on that though. Let's have another look at that because that is.
Yeah, that looks so cool. I need to
super neat.
Commission that. Put that on a t-shirt or a book. That looks amazing.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. Unbound by the confines between realities, the darkness of Dead March overtook the super dry.
Dang.
So there you go. There's a story on there too.
So, what got you writing into the first place in terms of books? I know you mentioned that you're a copywriter, so obviously you do that professionally, but what about getting into, the fantasy and sci-fi realm of things?
Yeah, so, I think like pretty much every writer I know started as a reader. Just loved books growing up. Probably stemmed from my dad reading me The Hobbit as a kid in bed and just, going to Under the Mountain with Gollum and, the Smaug with the dragon. And I think there's an illustrated version by Peter Allen, did all the art for it. And that probably, now that I think about it, is probably what got me into art and fantasy art in general as well. So that'd have to be a really influential book for me. And so that after that, I, as a teen, just dove into the Dragonlance series. I was born in 1981, so I lived right through the golden age of 80s horror, and loved horror as well. So read a lot of Clive Barker and Stephen King, and there's some dark fantasy in there too. And so I just went through this journey and just really loved books. And as a surfer, doing a lot of travel, on planes and sitting in cars, I'd just be reading all the time. There's no phones at that point.
Yeah.
So that's basically what got me into it. And then in my final year of high school, I took an elective. I shouldn't admit this, but I took an elective of English literature because it was all girls. I was like, that's the class for me. I like
That's
books.
Smart.
Yeah. And so, but the teacher, Carol Hobbs, her name was just one of those teachers. I think everyone's had one of those teachers in their lives where just so inspiring and had a massive passion for words and literature in general, and just got me excited about writing and reading, so much so that the following year I did a split degree of arts and commerce at university, or college you would call it, and I majored in literature. I did a triple major in literature, journalism and marketing. And so that sort of took me on that path, right? Like, I wrote for magazines and newspapers. I went into a sales job, but at the time at university, I got, in my final year, got assigned an assignment to, or you had to write a story to create a contemporary Satan. And I was like, this sounds great. This is right up my alley. So I did that, and it was the best mark I got for anything ever at university. Mm-hmm. And so then I just decided I'm going to turn this into a book. So I turned that into my first book, which was called Hellbound. And that got picked up by a publisher in the UK. And
oh, wow.
And I was working as a salesperson at that point. And so then I sort of pivoted and went, right, well, from what the advance they were going to pay me, which is minor, I'm not going to be able to live off this, but if I just write every day, I'll get better and better. And that's when I went into copywriting, and yeah, that's basically been the journey since then, is writing books and supplementing that income with advertising campaigns and things like that. And I think I've since found out that some of my favorite authors, like James Patterson and Salman Rushdie, started as copywriters as well. So yeah, it's a good, you learn economy of words and snappy kind of hooky writing, and yeah, sometimes it gets in the way because you read a chapter and you're like, that sounds like an ad. This is bad. But most of the time it helps, and you learn to write to deadline too, instead of just writing when you feel like it.
Mm-hmm. So are you also like a reader too? Like, do you read a lot?
I read a lot of books. I mean, it comes with the territory, right? Like, I think if you stop reading, your ideas dry up. I mean, for me, that's where a lot of ideas come from, is listening to podcasts, reading non-fiction and fiction, and all these weird little ideas sort of start to ping up here, and then a couple of them come together, and then a new idea forms. And so, yeah, I'm a massive reader. I think, like I said, I'm starting to work my way through the Dresden Files books. I'm halfway through a non-fiction book at the moment called The Coming Wave, which is about artificial intelligence and biotech. It's a non-fiction book. It's actually terrifying. It's so scary. So yeah, I read a lot. And I've got a book on my bedside table that's like this thick.
Oh man.
And ironically, it's called A Little Life. And but it's a huge book, and I think it's been shortlisted for the Booker Prize and things like that. So I still haven't opened it yet because it looks so big. But I'll get there.
Intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I bet. Oh, you're obviously a reader as well. What's on your to be read TBR pile, as they call them these days?
It's funny that you mentioned biotech, because I'm actually reading through Jurassic Park for my very first time right now.
Unreal.
And I'm about like 90% into it. I'm almost done, and it's been a fantastic read so far. Yeah. Like, it's so much different compared to the movie, but I still love it though. Like, I love the movie, I love the book. It's both good in its own way.
Yeah, so I find it fascinating when you watched a movie first and go back to read the book, or vice versa. You get people go, oh, the book was so much better. Mm-hmm. I often find if I watch the movie first and then read the book, I'm like, the movie was better, because it's your first impression and it's really shaped what you think about the characters and the story. So yeah, sometimes I think you just have to let that go and take, like, it's related, but I had the interesting experience of the Hellbound books, which turned into a trilogy, went into development to be made into a film and then a TV series. It never made it to screen, but it was a really cool experience because you sort of understand that a lot of things in books just don't work on the screen.
Yeah.
And, the perfect or a great example I can give you is The Hunger Games, where in the book, there's a scene where Katniss is in a tree and there's just like probably 10 pages of internal monologue about what she's feeling and her decisions that she's trying to like work through, the game theory of how she's going to win this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like 3 seconds in the movie of her sitting in a tree looking, out at this guy that's trying to stalk her. And so it really does show you how different the two mediums are. And you just have to change things. And when people are like, oh, they weren't true to the book, often it's just because you couldn't be. And in a book, you don't have to pay actors to be on the page. So you might have 3 people doing kind of the same job almost. And when it comes to a script, they're like, well, let's blend these 2 characters together and they'll be, that's why you'll often see possibly your favorite character dropped from the film. Because they weren't doing a job that was necessary to tell the story.
What was your top read of 2023 now that we're here in the new year?
Okay. I think so. I read this book in 2023, but it came out previously. Am I allowed to do that?
But that's perfectly fine. Whatever you read last year is in the running.
So, to give a little bit of context, I've just finished a few months ago a trip around Australia in a caravan with my family. So it took a year to go around the whole country.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was so much fun. And so because I've got an 8 and a 10-year-old that want my attention a lot of the time, I can read in short snippets and need to something that's really engaging to be able to pull me through. And I probably put down 4 or 5 books in a row that I just couldn't get into them. And then I picked up in what we would call an op shop, you would call a thrift store, a secondhand battered copy of Red Rising by Pierce Brown.
Ooh. Okay.
And my God, what a great book. I was just captivated from page 1. Like, it really just ripped me right through that book. And then I found out there was a second one. I was like, yes.
Golden Sun. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think they might be developing it into a film or a TV series as well.
I hope so.
Man, like, I think he's a screenwriter too by trade, Pierce Brown. But yeah, I mean, to me, that was one that massively stood out as, I think it's billed as the Hunger Games on Mars, but it's so much more than that. It's just, just amazing, the politics and the relationships, and it's one of those books where as a writer I'm like, I wish I could write like that. It disheartens you and it inspires you at the same time.
Yeah, that Red Rising series, it's one of my top sci-fi series of all time, so I completely understand that being a top pick for you.
So that was a good. What about you? What's one of the best for 2023?
2023, probably my best read, or one of my favorite reads, was a book by James Islington, which is called The Will of the Many, which was phenomenal for me. He wrote the Lacanius trilogy as well, which I also loved. So this book, I tore through that thing within a matter of days. And the crazy thing is that, like, the book, it does not, it looks like it's this big, like not too big, but the font is so tiny to where
Yeah.
there at least be another 100, 200 pages if it was a normal font.
Mm-mm.
So it was like a 600-page book that should have been 800 pages, but I tore through that thing.
Oh, great. Unreal. Well, yeah, I mean, what else did I read? I mean, I read a bunch of Brandon Sanderson last year, which he's just the GOAT. He's so good at what he does. Every time I read one of his books, it's just like he's really polished. Sci-fi, fantasy, whatever he kind of does, he does a great job at. So yeah, but yeah, that Red Rising, if anyone that's made it all the way to the end, then that's my number one pick. Go and up, aside from Thrill Switch and Killware, get into that series, because it's a masterclass of world building and character writing. It's really well done.
I guess going back to the end, I wanted to leave this off with a question for you. Actually, just giving the floor to you to say anything that you want to whoever's watching this all the way here at the end. You can talk about your books, you can talk about your life, you can talk about anything. The floor is yours with whatever you want to tell whoever made it this long into the video.
God, on the spot. I think if I could say anything to anyone at this point in history, it's take the time to read between the lines, because there's always more to it. We live in a world where people don't have the attention span to read a 100-word story sometimes, let alone a newspaper article or a well-written thought piece. They just read the headline and assume things, and then we get pissed off at each other and we don't understand each other as people. So I would just say, always take the time to read between the lines. There's always more to it, and try and be a little bit more nuanced if you can.
There we go.
Yeah.
Look at the subtext, read between the lines.
Yeah, open that book.
Last words. So, yeah, thank you again so much, Tim, for joining me here tonight. Or your afternoon, I'm sorry. Your afternoon over there.
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Hopefully that $15 beer was worth it to you, and the other beers that you drank. Hopefully you got some good enjoyment out of those. I really appreciate you joining me tonight. It's been a lot of fun. So again, thank you so much. I think we're good to peace out now.
Thank you.
Awesome. See you guys. Peace.